Well, hello, dear friends. Today I'll speak in English. I would like to tell you about hidden trends in the world policy with its deglobalization. And these trends deal with uh, the role of paramilitary forces. I mean, the Cossacks in Russia and former Russian republics. And it will be very interesting for you and me to see who will replace Putin. And I have some hints about a new figure that will be very influential with support of Cossacks. So let's start from the very beginning. I would like to tell you that not weaponry of mass destruction and bloodshed or bloodbath will deal in Russia after the so-called special military operation. It will be quite different confederations where Cossacks or paramilitary forces can play their significant role uh, in peace and food instead of war. So that's my point, and let's start uh, listening
On the
and
Cossack perspective in the post-Russian Federation for many, the theses about the self-determination of the post-Russian Federation with the peaceful and bloodless emergence of a confederation of city-states look unusual. But the centrist Putinists and even some of their opponents, but in mentality the same centrists, sovereignists, do not believe in a peaceful confederation of city-states. At least like Khabarovsk with Governor Fergal, for example. That is, we are talking about self-government without weapons of mass destruction and geostrategic scarecrows of nuclear war and bloodbath, excluding post-Soviet dictatorship of the Kremlin. Perhaps something will be useful for Ukraine and Belarus in their new formats of confederation at home and as part of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth 3. The Cossacks will play their role in this, and not the lumpen military from the Special Military Operation (SMO) in Ukraine. If General Shoigu's armed forces, PMC Wagner and Putin's foot soldiers from Chechnya were exterminated and discredited in 2022-2023, then 160,000 of the United Cossack Army are waiting for the H-hour, like an ambush regiment. There may not be President Lukashenko as an ally of the Kremlin. There may not be President of Turkey Erdogan as a servant of the two masters, the Petrocrats of the Kremlin and its allies. But there is a Cossack paramilitary formation with traditions of honor and valor. Either they are used by Putin's successor, Patrushev Jr., or by the new Fergals in the latent city-states, as it began in Khabarovsk 2020. There is a genetic memory of the self-defense of the Cossacks of their lands in the past. Those structures can be revived in the 21st century on the basis of cyber modernization. That aspect will be discussed in separate streams to come. So, a few theses on the topic: the Cossacks will ensure peace and order in the post-Russian space. 1. History proves the survivability of the Cossacks under any political regimes because of the genetic love of freedom. 2. The Cossacks are loyal to any government for the sake of peace and order. That is why their traditional clothing stands out among the army and the police. By the way, Pashtuns have always stood out for their clothes and did not recognize military uniforms in principle. That is why in future city-states and existing closed societies such as organized crime groups of the Kuban, Siberia and other regions, the Cossacks have become or will become the backbone of the kings and their law and order structures, but in their traditional clothes. 3. Contrary to speculation and primitivization, the Cossacks have never been either group countrymen, racist or nationalist. 13 Slavic Cossacks in Russia and Ukraine coexisted with Cossacks from ethnic groups, tribes, half-breeds and quarterons from the Mongols, Turk-Tatars, Caucasians, Persians, Lithuanian Tatars, Karaites from the Crimea and Cossack Poles. 4. Cossacks are not bound by one religion, although most of them belong to the Russian Orthodox Church and other branches of Orthodoxy in the United States, Argentina, Canada, and Australia, for example. But among them there are old believers, Islamists, shamanists, and lamists, supporters of the Tao, which brings the latter closer to Chinese President Xi. 5. The social, or rather, the genetic basis of the Cossacks is the peasants, mostly fugitive from the serfdom of czars, kings, general secretaries, and supposedly popularly elected communist presidents of the Russian Federation with their a priori illegal military service. Instead of becoming their instrument of wars and violence against the population, the Cossacks have a mental self-determination as angels of good. 6. Historians and philologists claim the birth of the Cossacks even before the Nativity of Christ, BC, and during the time of Genghis Khan, the Turkic Cossacks in the south of Russia, translated from local languages, were designated as freelance horse riders. 7. The multi-ethnic origin of the Cossacks makes them ideal defenders of the city-states in the post-USSR. RF. CIS without fear of bloodbaths against Gentiles, foreigners, and, of course, Jews who crucified Christ. The Tatar Turkic, Russian, Ukrainian, and other ethnic origins of the Cossacks are the result of migration during the arrival of the Golden Horde through the lands and mountains of present-day Eurasia and the Caucasus. Since then, the fortresses of the Cossacks have served as a historically legitimized basis for the self-defense of future city-states in the post-Russian Federation. 8. The professionalism of the Cossacks has always been manifested, A. in the protection of transported goods, B. border protection of cities, and C. in private security activities, for example, by side of the Shah of Iran. 9. At the same time, the Cossacks have been always fled from serfdom, taxes, hunger, and justice according to paper laws, and themselves judge criminals from their midst. 10. Therefore, the Cossacks are the eternal source of disobedience to any sovereign power of the centrists with their rivalry, the Golden Horde with the Muscovites, the Krimchaks with the imperial power of Russia, the white monarchists with the red communist imperialists. 11. The independence of the Cossacks used to serve as a buffer for the sovereignists, centrists on the borders against their imperial neighbors. Now the Cossacks are the mainstay of non-centrism. 12. The Cossacks were and remain a reservoir of radicalism. The sovereign power keeps the Cossacks away from their vulnerable nerve centers, and it isolates them from the population by wars for attrition, outside or on the borders of sovereign centrist powers. 13. In the 20th century, centrist sovereignists sold weapons to free Cossacks at half price, and for 25 and later for 18 years of service, they allocated land plots for personal farming. 14. That is why 60% of the Cossacks served the Tsar, and only 31% of the peasants. And in 1914-1920s, the number of Cossacks in military operations for against the Tsar sharply decreased, and because of mass emigration. 15. The Soviet government became the death of the traditional Brotherhood of Cossacks, while the collapse of the Tsarist Empire, the 13 centers of the Cossacks could become the brace of the centrist monarchists in the war against the centrist Bolsheviks, but also for the Confederates like Eamon Makhno's Gulaypol movement. 16. In the USSR under Stalin and his war with Hitler, the Cossacks were physically destroyed by repression and deliberate losses when General Davader's Cossacks were sent under Hitler's tanks' fire with swords. Captured Cossacks in the Wehrmacht units after the defeat of the Reich were completely destroyed later already in the Gulag. 17. After the Second World War, the form and history of the Cossacks were banned. But the revival of the Cossacks proceeded at an ever faster pace while the system of centrism of the USSR RFCIS started degrading. From the folklore ensembles of the Cossacks of the 1970s, Their self-organization by the 1990s became the mainstay of the anti-communist reformation of political power until 1992. And then there was a disintegration of the Cossacks' revival into disloyal and neutral associations of the Cossacks to the local authorities of the Russian Federation, CIS. 18. The Cossacks ceased to be monolithic under the initial multi-party system of the 1990s, and even more so when it was replaced by the hidden dictates of the special services in the 2000s and up to 2023. Cossack imams, appointed from above, reflected the political views permitted by the special services. 19. Despite the factionalism created by the special services, the Cossacks still reflected the common hopes for self-government of the periphery. There, the hopelessness of poverty and the absence of political leaders from the center created the ground for non-centrism, and replied to the call of President Yeltsin, take sovereignty as much as you swallow. 20. Centrist politicians made puppets out of the Cossacks under their control to intimidate the Confederate elites. But even this already serves the selection by those elites, the Federalist centrists call them OCGs, of representatives of the Cossacks in the local paramilitary forces for the protection of public, internal security of latent city-states. 21. The traditions of the Cossacks of past centuries are being revived with the alleged assistance of the law enforcement agencies of the Federals, but in fact, replacing them with their own methods of law and order. B. Border Guards Federals, taken away from them the initiative in territorial and other conflicts in the Russian Federation, CIS, CSTO, in 1993, the Cossacks were integrated into the armed forces of the Russian Federation by decree of President Yeltsin on a voluntary basis, and this is a reserve for the future of the Cossacks in the confederations of the ex-Russian Federation. 22. The lack of control over the Cossacks created hot spots of contact with the local population in the ex-USSR. Religious differences were added to the ethnic problems between Russians and non-Russians, which only exacerbated the registered Cossacks who served for the money of the federal government. These religious conflicts between the Cossacks and the population of the ex-USSR also included international conflicts in the CIS, up to the SMO in Ukraine. There, the Kuban Cossacks and Chechens as Putin's foot soldiers are clearly counting on land and money from Moscow. 23. The aggravation of ethno religious feelings within the Cossacks leads to the arrogance of Russians against the Brotherhood of the Peoples of the USSR and the pretended Brotherhood of the Cossacks. This phenomenon of hostility between the brothers was the result of the strengthening of the Petrocrats centrists on the flow of petrodollars. In two more Chechen wars, the Petrocracy put the previously free, mentally Cossacks at its service in the seizure of oil and gas regions and routes for transporting oil and gas to the territories of the ex-USSR. 24. From the CIS countries, they were under the gun army by centrist Muscovites and the former brother Cossacks, with the collapse of its former brotherhood that was stretched from Kaliningrad to Sakhalin. In 2023, the Kremlin is already creating 12 military brotherhoods plus 2 Cossack societies, 160,000 people in 2022 to fight the formerly Ukrainian brothers in the Donbass. 25. Muslims and Jews are always expelled from the ranks of the registered Cossacks as a fifth column, and the very Slavic Cossacks have long been dissatisfied with so-called sovereignist foreigners in political power. They do not care for the Cossack Slavs, for example, Kuban, 56,000 in meaningless armed conflicts without guarantees for the protection of their families and rewards for service. The obvious dissatisfaction of the registered Cossacks is voiced by the PRLVOCATEUR herald allegedly from the military radicals Slavs Strilkovgurkin. He is increasingly declaring the genocide of Russians in the SMO by the military political elite of the Kremlin from only Jews. Both Putin and Prigozhin, as his pseudo-critic, Supposedly to replace him are Jews. And Oleg Gazmanov, who sings about that, Yisal, the captain of the Cossacks, confessed about the Belarusian dad and the Jewish mom. We, in Russia, are waiting for 3 black swans in 2 weeks. The disappearance of President Erdogan after the election, 28th of May, the grave or hospital for the feeling not well autocrat Lukashenko, and the final dismissal of pseudo-President Biden, also because of health reasons. And then the struggle of the Petrocrats for Donbass with its lithium for benefits of the Big-Techs and Global Digitalization. A new world actor might appear as a new Russian Graintocracy. Its base is mainly in the Kuban Region with 56,000 Cossack soldiers to protect this new world actor, with support of other Cossack brothers, up to 200 plus thousand armed men. This might be a turn from the squabbling of the Petrocrats with the Big-Techs over the lithium of Donbass. It can be done by Putin's successor, Minister of Agriculture Petrocrat Jr. Then it is he, as the master of soft power with its grain supplies to the global south, who could become the leader of the new graintocracy of the Russian Federation, Ukraine, and other players in the SCO, BRICS alliance, Iran and Venezuela. And such a turn will strengthen the qualitatively different property of the Cossack Brotherhood, but not on petrodollars or bitcoins, but on huge profits from the export of grain and oilseeds. Well, what if the Cossack Confederate Danushka has already spilled sunflower oil, like in the well-known novel by Michael Bulgakov? It will be a bummer for autocrats with their thirst to become kings of the hill of the oil, gas, and alternative energy complexes. And will a new messiah with his grain under such a Cossack's protection just come to save the whole world after Putin? Won't his pretty face crack? The bottom line is as follows. Only peaceful Confederates in out of the ex-USSR/RF/Ukraine are to end the SMO and cope with world problems with or without Cossacks. The 20th.
All right. I would like to add some more clarity to names, because a lot of people don't understand um, Russian names. Patrushev is the head of Security Council of Russia, and his son is the Minister of Agriculture. Oleg Gozmanov is a singer who was very popular with his Cossack songs. Annushka, in the last phrases, the hero, literature hero from the well-known novel by Michael Bulgakov, Master and Margaret. So there are some hints to the literature, to the Russian literature, to the Russian traditions. So let's live with these traditions, good traditions, and hope for peace and security for the former Russian Federation, because it will be divided into 100 or 120 city states with their independence, with their self-ruling, and with their self-defense, with support of Cossacks or other paramilitary forces. So that's all. I'm waiting for your replies, remarks, and well, other things like this. Bye bye.